You know the old definition of Washington, it's a place where a friend is someone who stabs you in the chest. That's not the way the Federal Reserve operates. I think it is perhaps the last deliberative body that is totally civil. And when you're done, and you embrace the policy going forward, and you proceed to operate your businesses as a banker or do your business as a governor of the Federal Reserve. I hope that exhausts that question, Alex.
Okay. Richard, you have had a distinguished business career in the private sector. You have had a distinguished term of office in the executive branch, and now you are serving in the Federal Reserve System. Compare and contrast the differences of these different areas of service.
Well, I touched on that just now, Alex, so I'll make it short. When I accepted this position, Alan Greenspan said, you only have one obligation, to speak to the truth. I don't know anywhere else where you could do that in public policy. Frankly, I don't know, you can't even do that in my own firm, and I was managing partner. Because you were worried about satisfying a customer or satisfying a faction within your firm or being politically correct. I don't ever feel restrained as a Federal Reserve official from speaking what I feel is correct. In my opinion, and I speak only for myself, I don't have to clear my speeches with a soul. The bankers speak on their own behalf, the governors speak on their own behalf, and the chairman will speak on our behalf when he is required to do so. So, Alex, I think that's somewhat unique. As I said, what really makes it unique is it's a civil deliberation, and people are mannerly and respectful. And if you disagree with someone, it's argued at the table. It's an intellectual argument or a practical argument, and there's no retribution afterwards. So I think that makes us substantially different.
Great. So the majority of the questions I would categorize as personnel questions. They mostly revolve around Chairman Bernanke and former Chairman Greenspan. Compare and contrast. Do you have a good story? Why don't you talk to us a bit about their management styles and give us some flavor to serving for those two gentlemen.
You're presuming they're gentlemen?
Yeah.
Okay, they are, by the way. They're great gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you a true story. First of all, Alan was wizened, was older, had been around the block. He had been a business consultant. He had, by the way, I think one of the things that made him unusual, he listened very well because he had played the saxophone for big bands when he was trying to make money as a kid, and you have to get on someone's own syncopation and beat. You have to adapt yourself. I actually think that was a marvelous attribute. At the very last meeting, though, each of us said something to bid him farewell. And I happen to be a fan of Shakespeare, and so I rewrote Henry V's soliloquy at Agincourt. And it was we few, we precious few, and I changed everything to bankers. When I was done, he said, President Fisher, was that Shakespeare? I said, yes, Mr. Chairman. He said, I went to high school with that guy. That's how long I've been around. So the point is they both have a sense of humor. Ben has a very charming sense of humor, and he uses it well. I think Ben Bernanke's, as I was quoted in the New York Times today, I want to go beyond that. He is not only prodigiously smart, but I think the best thing that ever happened to Ben, Chairman Bernanke, was that he served on the school board in Princeton, New Jersey. And I'm very serious about that. He was also chairman of the economics department at Princeton. He has, as I said, a prodigious brain. He understands the Great Depression better than any living human being, in my opinion. But what allows him to run a meeting the way he does, with harmony and results, I think was that training on the school board. I ran for the United States Senate. I've negotiated with the U.S. Congress on behalf of a president twice. That's a piece of cake compared to being on a school board or, say, coaching a Y football team. Those are probably the two toughest things you can do as a young person. So the answer, Alex, is that both have a sense of humor. Both are quite worldly and knowledgeable. I know that people thought that Ben was too academic at the beginning. You don't go through the kind of crisis we've been through and get the results that we get if you're a pure academic. It doesn't work that way. And I think he has been battle-hardened. I think we've all been battle-hardened by this experience. We found out that the pipes that lead to the sprinkler heads of what I call the great fertile lawn of the American economy, some of them were awfully clogged, or they didn't go to do what they were supposed to do, or the sprinkler heads didn't work. And it became immediately apparent that we had to change our toolkit. Ben Bernanke led the leadership, was the leadership of figuring out what the new tools would be as we discussed them and debated them and decided what to do. So it isn't just debating the cut in the federal funds rate, the base interest rate that banks lend to each other. It's also restoring the viability of the financial system. And I think his pragmatic hardball approach has been very productive in this sense, Alex. But again, you should always conduct yourself with a sense of humor when you're doing serious work, and both of them have it.
You are listening to the Commonwealth Club of California radio program, and our speaker today is Richard Fisher, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, who is discussing U.S. fiscal and monetary policy. Just as a follow-on to that, Richard, do you think that the latter part of the Greenspan administration was too accommodative?
One could argue in hindsight that rates were kept too low for too long, and I'll tell you why one could argue it, because I have argued it publicly. But it's easy to do that as an armchair quarterback or a Monday morning quarterback, as I said earlier. Unless you were at the table, unless you understood the circumstances, the risk of deflation at one point, which is as insidious as inflation. We saw Japan go through this for a prolonged period from 1990 onwards. They're just crawling out of it now. It set them back enormously, the second most powerful economy in the world. That, I think it doesn't do any good to go back and say what we did wrong. The real question is, what do we do going forward? And Alex, I don't know how to answer it any better than that.
Well, there are a number of questions here about prognostication.
That's a good one, since I just did it.
They revolve around what the future has to hold for us, the impact of recent actions on the banking and mortgage industry. Mm-hmm. Is the U.S. headed for stagflation as a way to resolve the financial, budget, and trade problems? Do you agree with Chairman Bernanke that the worst times are yet to come, et cetera, and so forth? Could you comment on that trend of questioning?
Well, I don't think Chairman Bernanke has said the worst times are yet to come. At least he hasn't told me that. I do think we are in for a period of anemic economic activity. We, as I mentioned in my speech, we saw a credit system, which is how you allocate capital to small businesswomen and businessmen that depend on commercial paper or borrowing from their bank to operate. Remember, small businesses create jobs in America. That's where jobs are created. That's where adaptation takes place. And we saw a debauching of the credit system. I mentioned that in my speech. So to correct that, it means that those that provide credit, whether they're bankers or other financiers, will be more cautious as they proceed because they don't want to experience further losses. And that's a dampening effect on the economy. People who have experienced their own losses in terms of their values of their homes and what equity they can withdraw from those homes feel poor, and they will consume less. People that feel embattled by the price of food and by energy. And incidentally, the Dallas Federal Reserve does not take out energy and food in our calculation of inflation. Everybody I know has to drive and eat. And particularly important since we are a service-driven economy where the human brain is the capital plant of what we produce in this country. You've got to have food and you have to have energy. But the prices of those commodities have risen significantly. Why? Because we won. What do I mean by we won? The Soviet Union filed for bankruptcy on November of 1989. Mao died. I won't say God rest his soul. Ho Chi Minh is dead. Vietnam, China, the former Soviet Union, all